There's a peace that can't be described, only felt. It's the kind of peace that settles in your heart when you realize that you don't have to face life alone. When you speak to Allah every day, even in whispers, you begin to experience a calm that no worldly comfort can provide. You start to see life differently. You stop overthinking what's beyond your control. And you start trusting the one who controls everything. Building a personal connection with the Creator is not just about performing acts of worship. It's about forming an unbreakable bond that fills every part of your life with peace, strength, and meaning. When you start talking to Allah every day, you begin to experience a relationship that is deeper than any connection you can have with another human being. You begin to realize that this bond is not one-sided. It is living, breathing, and powerful. It changes the way you think, feel, and respond to the world around you. It's not just about praying when things go wrong. It's about conversing with Allah when things go right, when you're there uncertain, and when your heart simply needs to feel heard. Every conversation with Allah is a moment of renewal. When you wake up and whisper gratitude for another day, you are building that connection. When you pour out your heart during times of sadness, you are deepening it. And when you take a few seconds in silence to say, Alhamdulillah, even for the smallest blessings, you are strengthening that invisible bridge between your soul and its Creator. This relationship doesn't require grand words or ritualized language. It only requires sincerity. Even a single heartfelt, Wa Allah, said with full conviction can change the direction of your entire day. The beauty of building a daily connection with Allah is that you start to feel His presence in every moment. You sense it when your plans suddenly align without effort. You feel it when you were about to lose hope, but peace unexpectedly washes over you. You see it in the way your heart softens when you forgive someone, or when you find courage to keep going after failure. These aren't coincidences. They're signs that your bond with Allah is growing stronger, that you're no longer walking alone through life, but walking with divine companionship. When you build this personal relationship with Allah, you'll notice something incredible. The things that once caused anxiety begin to lose power over you. The opinions of people, the weight of your worries, the uncertainty of tomorrow, they all begin to shrink in importance. Why? Because when your heart learns to lean on the Creator, it no longer clings to creation. You begin to understand that everything and everyone else is temporary, but your relationship with Allah is eternal. That realization frees you. You no longer look for validation in people because you already feel seen by the one who knows your soul. You no longer chase endless distractions to fill your emptiness because the remembrance of Allah fills you completely. Talking to Allah every day transforms loneliness into closeness. You could be sitting alone in your room, tears running down your face, but the moment you whisper, Ya Allah, I need you, that loneliness fades. It's replaced by warmth, an invisible assurance that you are never truly alone, because He is always there, closer to you than your own heartbeat. That awareness changes how you handle everything. You begin to respond to difficulties with patience instead of panic. You start approaching success with humility instead of pride. You stop overanalyzing every outcome because you've learned that the one who listens to your heart also arranges your destiny. A daily connection with Allah is like oxygen for your soul. Just as your body weakens without air, your spirit weakens without remembrance. But when you speak to Him regularly in prayer, in gratitude, in pain, or even in silence, your soul begins to thrive. You feel centered even when life feels chaotic. You wake up with purpose, knowing that your day begins with the one who gave it to you. You go to sleep with peace, knowing that no matter what happened, you're still held by His mercy. That is the beauty of this relationship. It nurtures you in ways the world never can. This bond doesn't mean you won't face difficulties. You will, but they won't shake you the same way. Because now, instead of reacting with fear, you respond with faith. You remind yourself, Allah knows what I don't. Allah sees what I can't. That constant connection becomes your armor. It shields your mind from despair and fills your heart with trust. You begin to realize that every hardship is not a punishment, but a call to come closer. Every blessing is not just luck, but a reminder of His love. When you talk to Allah every day, you are not just practicing faith, you are living it. You are building an intimate friendship with the one who listens when no one else does, who understands your silence better than your words, and who loves you beyond measure. That connection transforms you from within. It gives you peace in chaos, strength in weakness, and clarity in confusion. It reminds you that no matter how uncertain life gets, you have a place of safety that never fades, the presence of Allah in your heart. When you begin to talk to Allah every day, something remarkable happens. Your heart begins to change. It's not a sudden transformation that happens overnight, but a gradual softening, a quiet awakening that unfolds within you. You start to notice that the same worries that once consumed your thoughts no longer hold the same power. The same anger that once controlled your emotions begins to fade. Why? Because you've allowed your heart to breathe in peace through the remembrance of Allah. You've opened a space within your soul where divine calmness settles, a peace that the world cannot give or take away. Daily communication with Allah purifies your thoughts and cleanses your emotions. Every time you pour your heart out in prayer, you're not just speaking, you're releasing the weight of your pain into hands far greater than yours. You begin to understand that you don't have to hold everything together. You only have to hold on to Him. Each conversation with Allah washes away a little more fear, a little more anxiety, a little more hopelessness. And in its place, He plants seeds of patience, gratitude, and serenity. Slowly but surely, your heart begins to align with divine wisdom instead of worldly noise. One of the most beautiful effects of speaking to Allah daily is that it reprograms your mindset. You start to see your struggles differently. What once felt like a curse you now recognize as a lesson. What once made you feel helpless now becomes an opportunity for growth. This change in perception comes from trust, the deep understanding that nothing in your life happens without purpose. When you keep Allah close in your daily dialogue, you begin to view every event through the lens of faith, not fear. You say to yourself, if Allah allowed this, there's goodness hidden in it. That belief becomes your greatest source of strength. Through this daily connection, you also develop a sense of emotional maturity. You stop reacting impulsively to people or situations because your heart is anchored in something greater. When someone hurts you, instead of lashing out, you turn to Allah and say, you know the truth. When something doesn't go as planned, instead of panicking, you whisper, Allah will make a way. This emotional discipline doesn't come from weakness. It comes from spiritual strength. The more you talk to Allah, the more you realize that He is in control, and that realization keeps you grounded when everything else feels uncertain. Talking to Allah every day also builds inner confidence. It's not the loud, boastful kind of confidence that the world admires, but the quiet assurance that comes from knowing you're guided, protected, and loved by the Almighty. You stop seeking validation from people because your validation comes from the one who created you. You stop fearing failure because you know that Allah's plan is far bigger than your temporary setbacks. You stop feeling in fear because you remember that Allah chose you uniquely, perfectly, and purposefully. That kind of confidence can't be shaken by rejection or criticism because it's built on faith, not approval. Moreover, daily communication with Allah strengthens your ability to forgive. When you speak to the most forgiving every day, your own heart begins to soften toward others. You remember how often you've fallen short, how many times you've needed mercy, and yet Allah never turned you away. That realization makes it easier to let go of grudges, to release resentment, to free yourself from emotional chains. You learn that forgiving others isn't a sign of weakness. It's an act of strength born from divine love. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. There's also a deep sense of purpose that comes with this habit. When you make Allah your daily companion, your life begins to feel more directed. You wake up with a reason, not just to survive another day, but to live it meaningfully. You start to notice signs, coincidences, and blessings that remind you of His presence. Every small act becomes sacred. A smile, a kind word, a moment of patience, because you're no longer living randomly. You're living consciously in His remembrance. This relationship with Allah transforms not only your emotions, but also your identity. You begin to see yourself differently. You no longer define yourself by your past mistakes, your weaknesses, or the labels people have given you. You define yourself by your connection with Allah. As His servant, His creation, His beloved. And that awareness liberates you from so much unnecessary pain. You realize that you are enough, not because the world says so, but because He says so. So when you talk to Allah every day, you're not just building a habit, you're reshaping your soul, you're teaching your heart to find peace in surrender, joy in gratitude, and strength in faith. Over time, this relationship becomes your anchor, a steady source of emotional balance in a world that constantly tries to unbalance you. And when your heart learns to find calm in Him, nothing and no one can take that peace away. When you talk to Allah every day, your life begins to take on a rhythm that is both peaceful and purposeful. The chaos around you doesn't stop. The problems, challenges, and uncertainties remain, but your response to them transforms entirely. What changes is not the outside world, but the state of your inner world. Every conversation with Allah becomes a moment of renewal, a time where your soul is realigned with faith, patience, and hope. You begin to realize that true peace is not found in the absence of struggle, but in the presence of divine connection. Each day that you speak to Allah, you strengthen the bond between your heart and His mercy. You start to feel that you're never truly alone, no matter what the circumstances may be. When the world turns its back on you, you still have a place to turn, a place where your tears are seen, your silence is understood, and your pain is felt. This realization is powerful. It removes the loneliness that eats away at so many hearts, because you begin to understand that Allah listens even when no one else does. He hears your whispers, your sighs, and your unspoken thoughts. Talking to Him daily keeps your heart alive and your faith active, even when life tries to make you numb. This habit of communicating with Allah also changes the way you view hardship. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is Allah trying to teach me through this?" That small shift in perspective opens the door to wisdom and maturity. You start to see how every difficulty carries within it a hidden gift. Maybe it's patience, maybe it's strength, maybe it's the removal of something harmful that you were too attached to. The daily connection helps you trust the process even when you can't see the outcome. You begin to surrender, not out of weakness, but out of deep understanding that Allah knows what you don't. When you build this consistent relationship with Allah, it begins to reflect in your behavior and character. You become more gentle, more patient, more forgiving. Your ego starts to lose its grip on you because you realize that everything you have, your life, your time, your opportunities, are blessings from Him. So instead of reacting harshly to others, you learn to respond with grace. Instead of carrying grudges, you learn to let go because you remember that Allah is the ultimate judge. You stop wasting energy on things beyond your control, choosing instead to put your energy into things that bring you closer to Him. Daily conversation with Allah also teaches you consistency, a rare quality in a world filled with distractions. When you dedicate a few moments each day to talk to your Creator, it disciplines your soul. You start to prioritize what truly matters. Even if it's just a short dua whispered before sleep, that consistent effort builds your spiritual muscles. Over time, you'll notice that missing a day feels like something's off, because your soul becomes accustomed to that connection, to that peace. Just as your body craves food and water, your heart begins to crave that spiritual nourishment that only comes through talking to Allah. Another beautiful transformation that happens is the way you start viewing your blessings. When you speak to Allah every day, gratitude naturally becomes part of your being. You stop taking things for granted, your health, your family, your breath, your ability to wake up and see another sunrise. You realize that every small thing is a sign of Allah's love and mercy. Gratitude replaces complaints and appreciation replaces comparison. This shift fills your heart with contentment. And contentment is one of the greatest treasures a believer can have. Most importantly, talking to Allah daily makes you aware of how dependent you truly are on Him. It humbles you in the most beautiful way. You realize that no matter how strong, successful, or confident you appear, you still need His guidance at every step. You start every morning asking Him for direction and end every night thanking Him for protection. This humility becomes your shield against arrogance and pride. It reminds you that your strength lies not in your independence, but in your surrender. Over time, you will notice that your entire outlook on life changes. You stop chasing happiness in people, possessions, or achievements. Instead, your heart finds joy in closeness to Allah. You begin to feel a calmness that can't be explained, a serenity that flows even in the middle of chaos. Because when you talk to Allah every day, your soul becomes anchored in faith. The storms may come, but they can't drown you anymore. You've learned to float on trust. Trust that whatever happens, Allah is with you, guiding you, protecting you, and writing your story in the most beautiful way possible. When you talk to Allah every day, something extraordinary happens. Your faith begins to transform into action. It's no longer just words you say or prayers you recite. It becomes the foundation upon which you live your entire life. Faith stops being an abstract concept and starts becoming your response to everything you face. It shows up in how you deal with problems, how you treat people, and how you view yourself. When your connection with Allah becomes consistent, you stop relying on your emotions and start relying on His wisdom. You realize that faith isn't about having everything figured out. It's about trusting the one who already has everything under control. This daily communication builds a rhythm in your heart, a rhythm of patience, gratitude, and surrender. When something doesn't go your way, instead of reacting with frustration, you pause, you breathe, you remember that Allah heard your prayer and that His timing is perfect. You stop forcing outcomes and start walking with trust. This kind of faith creates peace, not because life becomes easy, but because you learn to see Allah's plan even in the difficulty. You begin to believe that every delay, every disappointment, every closed door is leading you towards something greater. That understanding brings calmness to your heart and steadiness to your actions. Faith in action also means refusing to give up when life feels impossible. You keep moving forward, not because the path is clear, but because you believe Allah will make a way. Every test becomes an opportunity to prove your trust, not to the world, but to yourself. You start saying, if Allah brought me to it, He will bring me through it. This mindset turns obstacles into lessons and pain into growth. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what can I learn from this? That's what happens when you talk to Allah every day. You begin to see life through the lens of divine wisdom instead of temporary struggle. Another powerful change is how you begin to handle fear. Normally, fear controls people, fear of failure, of loss, of uncertainty. But when your faith is alive and active, fear loses its grip. You start to understand that whatever you lose, Allah can replace with something better. You stop panicking when things fall apart because you know Allah's plan is bigger than your perspective. You start to move with quiet confidence, not arrogance, but the calm assurance that you are guided. Even in silence, even in stillness, you can feel His presence strengthening you. You don't rush through problems anymore. You grow through them. Talking to Allah every day also shapes the way you treat others. When faith lives in your heart, you begin to act with compassion, mercy, and humility. You realize that just as Allah forgives your mistakes, you should forgive others. Just as He covers your flaws, you should avoid exposing someone else's. You begin to respond to negativity with patience, to anger with silence, and to injustice with prayer. That doesn't mean you become weak. It means you become wise. You learn that the strongest person is the one who can stay calm when everything around them is falling apart. Faith teaches you restraint, to let Allah fight the battles that you don't need to fight yourself. You'll also notice that this transformation doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, subtle, and sacred. Some days you'll feel strong and other days you'll struggle, but that's part of the process. Every time you talk to Allah, even if it's just for a few seconds, you're building that strength. You're watering the seeds of faith planted deep within your heart. Over time, those seeds bloom into patience, courage, and hope. Faith stops being a feeling and becomes your identity. You walk differently, you speak differently, and you face challenges differently because you know Allah is guiding you through every step. Faith in action also means learning to wait with grace. Waiting is one of the hardest tests in life, but it becomes easier when you remember who you're waiting on. When you talk to Allah daily, you're reminded that His delay is not His denial. You start to trust that what's written for you will reach you when the time is right. You no longer feel the need to rush destiny because you've already handed it over to the one who writes it perfectly. This surrender gives your soul rest. You stop being restless about the future and start being present in the moment, knowing Allah's plan is unfolding exactly as it should. The more you live with faith in action, the more peaceful your life becomes. Not because challenges disappear, but because you learn to walk through them with dignity. You realize that your strength doesn't come from your circumstances, but from your connection to Allah. You stop being reactive and start being reflective. You begin to understand that everything, the joy, the pain, the delays, the breakthroughs, is part of His divine choreography. And once you reach that level of trust, nothing can shake your peace. You don't have to control everything anymore, because you know the one who controls everything is already taking care of you. In the end, faith in action is not just believing that Allah can do something. It's living as if He already has. It's trusting Him even when you can't trace Him. It's knowing that no prayer goes unheard, no tear goes unseen, and no effort goes unrewarded. When you talk to Allah every day, you begin to walk through life with unshakable peace, not because you have everything, but because you know that with Allah, you already have enough. When you talk to Allah every day, you begin to notice a deep transformation within your heart, a transformation rooted in gratitude, humility, and awareness. You start to see the blessings in places you once overlooked. You begin to realize that life was never about having more, but about appreciating what you already have. Gratitude becomes your lens, your perspective, your way of seeing the world. It shifts your focus from what's missing to what's present, from what you've lost to what you've gained. This change doesn't happen overnight, but it grows stronger each day that you consciously speak to Allah, thank Him, and acknowledge His countless favors upon you. When your connection with Allah deepens, you begin to recognize that every moment of your life, even the painful ones, holds purpose. The breath you take, the food you eat, the people you meet, the lessons you learn, they're all part of His design. You stop living on autopilot and start living with intention. You begin your morning saying, Alhamdulillah, not just out of habit, but because you genuinely feel the weight of gratitude in your heart. Even in your struggles, you start to find reasons to thank Allah. You say, Ya Allah, thank you for testing me because this test brought me closer to you. Gratitude transforms pain into patience, fear into faith, and complaints into calm acceptance. Talking to Allah daily nurtures humility as well. You start to understand that everything you have, your health, your mind, your success, your loved ones, are gifts, not guarantees. You realize that they can be taken away in a second if Allah wills it. This awareness doesn't make you fearful. It makes you grateful. It humbles your heart and reminds you of your dependence on Him. You begin to walk through life with a softer spirit, less arrogance, and more kindness. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself to the world because you know your worth comes from Allah alone. That humility reflects in how you treat others. You become more understanding, more forgiving, more patient. You learn to see people with compassion rather than judgment, because you remember that everyone is fighting battles only Allah knows about. Gratitude also shifts your perspective on the things you once viewed as obstacles. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is Allah teaching me through this? You begin to see your hardships as opportunities for growth. You realize that the same pain that breaks you can also build you, depending on how you choose to see it. Gratitude helps you see the silver lining in the darkest clouds. You start to recognize that sometimes Allah removes certain things from your life not to hurt you, but to make room for better things ahead. You trust His plan even when you can't understand it, because your heart has learned to say Alhamdulillah in both ease and difficulty. One of the most beautiful things about talking to Allah every day is how it cultivates contentment. The world constantly tells you that you need more money, more success, more validation. But when you truly connect with Allah, you begin to realize that peace isn't found in more, it's found in enough. You stop chasing temporary satisfaction and start appreciating lasting blessings. You find joy in simplicity, in a quiet prayer, in a kind word, in a peaceful heart. You stop comparing your life to others because you know Allah's plan for you is unique. Gratitude protects you from envy and humility protects you from pride. Together, They bring you balance, the kind of balance that the world can't offer. This daily connection also changes how you respond to others. You become a source of positivity and peace for the people around you. Gratitude softens your tone, while humility opens your heart. You start to lift others up instead of competing with them. You become generous with your words, your time, your forgiveness, because you realize that every act of kindness is a form of worship. You understand that Allah's mercy reaches those who show mercy, and His forgiveness touches those who forgive. Talking to Allah reminds you to be that person, the one who spreads light even in darkness. Over time, you will find that this gratitude-centered faith becomes your protection. It shields you from despair when life gets hard and from arrogance when life goes well. It keeps you grounded, balanced, and mindful. When things go right, you say Alhamdulillah with a grateful heart. When things go wrong, you say Alhamdulillah with a trusting heart. You begin to understand that both joy and sorrow are part of your journey toward Allah. You see every blessing as a responsibility and every challenge as an opportunity to grow closer to Him. In the end, talking to Allah every day builds a heart that is both strong and gentle, strong enough to face whatever comes, and gentle enough to remain thankful through it all. Gratitude becomes your language, humility your character, and faith your foundation. You stop depending on the world for peace, because your peace now comes from within, from the quiet certainty that Allah has given you everything you need to live, grow, and flourish. And with every prayer, every whisper, and every Alhamdulillah, you take one more step toward a life filled with true, unshakable contentment. When you talk to Allah every day, the most profound transformation happens in your trust. You begin to build a deep, unshakable faith that Allah is always in control, that nothing happens by chance and nothing is outside His wisdom. You realize that every delay, every disappointment, and every detour is not a mistake, but a message. This kind of trust doesn't come from a single prayer. It's built through consistency, through showing up before Allah day after day, pouring your heart out and surrendering your worries. Over time, your heart learns to rest, not because your problems disappear, but because you finally stop fighting what Allah has already written for you. You learn to say, Ya Allah, I don't understand it, but I trust you. This trust changes the way you see life. You stop panicking when things don't go according to your plan. You stop fearing what's ahead because you know Allah has already gone before you and prepared the way. You stop questioning why and start saying Alhamdulillah. You realize that His plan is always better than yours, even if it takes time to understand. When you truly trust Allah, you no longer chase control, because control was never yours to begin with. You understand that your responsibility is to make effort, to pray, and to keep your heart sincere. The outcome that belongs entirely to Him. This realization frees you. It lifts a weight from your chest that you might not even realize you've been carrying. You stop trying to fix everything yourself and start allowing Allah to move things in your favor, in His time, in His way. This daily communication becomes the anchor that keeps you steady when life feels unstable. The world around you might be unpredictable, but when your trust is rooted in Allah, you are unshaken. You might cry, you might stumble, you might feel weak, but you'll never feel hopeless, because you know that Allah's mercy is greater than your mistakes and His wisdom is greater than your understanding. You begin to see His signs everywhere, in the timing of opportunities, in the people who leave, in the moments of stillness that once felt like silence. You understand that even when Allah seems quiet, He is working behind the scenes, aligning everything perfectly. Trusting Allah also means letting go of what hurts you even when it's hard. You stop holding on to things that drain your peace, because you know Allah will replace them with something better. You stop replaying the past in your head because you realize that no matter how much you think about it, you can't change what's already written. You learn to accept, to release, and to move forward with grace. Every time you let go for Allah's sake, He fills the emptiness in your heart with something far more valuable: contentment. You start to see that true strength isn't about holding on tightly. It's about trusting enough to let go. When you talk to Allah every day, you begin to notice that your patience grows stronger too. You no longer rush outcomes. You understand that just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it never will. You learn to wait with peace, not frustration. That's the beauty of trust. It allows you to rest in the middle of uncertainty. You can say, even if I can't see it, I know it's coming because my Lord never forgets. And when the answer finally comes, when the doors finally open, you look back and realize that Allah's delay was actually His protection. That what you thought was rejection was simply redirection, leading you to something far better than you imagined. Trusting Allah daily also transforms how you handle fear. Fear thrives on doubt, but faith destroys doubt. When your heart is connected to Allah, you know that whatever comes your way, you'll be able to handle it, not because you're strong, but because Allah is with you. You remind yourself that nothing can touch you unless He allows it, and nothing can harm you unless He wills it. That belief fills you with courage. You start to live with calm confidence, no longer paralyzed by what might go wrong, but hopeful for what Allah is preparing to go right. This kind of trust also brings a softness to your soul. You stop reacting harshly, stop forcing things, and stop questioning every challenge. Instead, you begin to walk through life with grace. You find peace in surrender, not because you've given up, but because you've given it over to the one who never fails. You realize that every time you put your trust in Allah, He gives you something better than what you asked for, sometimes in this world, sometimes in ways only your heart can feel. In the end, talking to Allah every day builds a faith that no storm can destroy. You stop looking for control and start looking for connection. You stop depending on your plans and start depending on His promise. You understand that nothing is random. Every person, every moment, every hardship, every joy is part of Allah's divine design. And when you live with that certainty, life stops feeling heavy. You learn to breathe again, to smile again, to trust again. Because now you know whatever happens, wherever you go, however life unfolds, Allah is always there guiding, protecting, and writing your story with love and perfection.